keeping those 3 points in mind, let's bring our awareness to trauma. Okay, what is trauma? Basic level, right? We hear this word. It's becoming more popular, right? Trauma is ultimately anything that is perceived as life-threatening or too overwhelming to experience. That will result in a traumatic experience. So yes, right, if you hear trauma, most likely you think of war, violence, abuse, right? Yes, that is extremely traumatic. It's something that's just so horrible, so horrific, it's too much to handle and experience, it's terrible. But what we fail to consider is that, yes, that's terrible and traumatic, but what was point number 2? As a kid, you depend on someone to survive and your perception is very limited. So what does that mean for a kid? Something that us here today as an adult would perceive as not traumatic at all, as a child you might perceive it as very traumatic. As a child, say you're lost in the grocery store, your survival's at risk now. You can't live on your own. You might think, well, I lost in the grocery store, I'm alone, I'll never find my parents again. Not necessarily true, but that's what you believe. And you will experience that same life or death situation, something traumatic, too overwhelming to handle, as anyone else. Okay? So realize here that no one is immune to it. No matter how good your childhood was, every single person alive has experienced something traumatic. Trauma is a part of life. We all go through it. Once more, even looking back, you'd be like, my childhood was awesome. Okay, what about the grocery store? Right? So we've all experienced this. Children can be overwhelmed by what we usually think of as common everyday events. It all depends on your perception. And what does trauma lead to? Suppression or repression. And this here is the big first thing that stifles that real you from shining through. Okay? Trauma. That is the first of 3 things that you're going to want to bring your awareness to and let go of. So here are some common examples, right? Say you're in class, right? You're in school, and you speak up, and maybe the teacher tells you to be quiet. That there could be traumatic for a kid. Even though as an adult you're like, oh, the teacher just said be quiet, right? You might have been speaking up at an inappropriate time too. Maybe it was quiet time, you're just like yapping about, and the teacher's going to teach you the rules and guidelines. Hey, it's not appropriate to be yapping about right now. As a kid, you're like, wow, they don't approve of me right now. They don't like me right now. They might, if they don't like me in the classroom, I could get kicked out of the classroom. If I'm kicked out of the classroom, depending on my limited perception, the classroom's the world, and I'm going to die. You could be yelled at a restaurant. You're with your parents. Be quiet. My parents don't love me right now. That's how you interpret it. It's not true. They just told you to be quiet. They don't love me. If they don't love me, they could abandon me. If they abandon me, I die. Survival instinct kicks in. Okay? And once more, this will lead to you either suppressing, right? Meaning consciously saying, ooh, let's take, for example, the part of me that is loud, right? So if you think of yourself as a whole, what you do is you create a split where there is the acceptable you, and then there's the unacceptable you, right? Good child, naughty child. So you're like, if I'm loud, it's not being accepted right now. The part of me that is loud is threatening my survival. Let's get rid of that. And you put it here. Let's never be loud again. Right? Oh, here's another one, right? When it comes to relationships. People find out as a kid that you like someone in class. And everyone starts teasing and singing songs, right? Like Julian and Sally in a tree, da-da-da. You and I interpret it like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. Oh, not true. But you interpret that, so hey, the part of me that expresses any interest in someone else, let's put it right here. Might say a joke. Friend's like, that's not funny. Oh, let's never say jokes again. So we all create this split. Okay? And this here, once more, is why it's hard to be social here today. And for a lot of people, that split could be a lot more extreme, where it's like, this is the only acceptable part of me. This is also why our confidence is just shot. Because at a core, you don't feel like you are good enough. You only feel like this part of you is good enough. And then there's all this unacceptable, toxic you got to get rid of. And then what's the approach we take? We try to overcompensate, to build up the front to compensate for all this. Right? What if people see through me? They'll see all that. No. And it's also, even if you think of general conditioning, why, again, you don't feel like you're good enough, because from the moment you're born, you believe it's not true that, oh, my parents only love me when I'm being a good, living by the rules children. If I say this or do that, they don't love me. But that's not true. But that's how we interpret it. So everyone has experienced trauma, and it led to suppression or repression, where you just completely dissociate, and you could say this is with a very traumatic experience. That experience never happened. It doesn't even register consciously. So that's the first thing that stifles our true selves from shining through.